Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Maintaining Quality Amidst COVID-19 Related Disruptions. My name is Steve Melito, and I will be your moderator. Hey, let's go over a few items so that you will know how to participate in today's event. For starters, you'll have the opportunity to submit questions by typing them into the questions pane in the control panel. You may submit your questions at any time, but we will collect and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's talk. Also, today's webinar will be recorded and available within 24 to 48 hours on the FuseHub website. It will also be sent to you via email link. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that this webinar is part of Manufacturing Reimagined, a series of webinars and workshops that are designed to help you manage the challenges created by COVID-19 so that you can become a more resilient and adaptable company that's prepared for future emergencies. Manufacturing Reimagined topics include emergency preparedness, supply chain utilization during a crisis, cybersecurity, equipment strategies, and disaster recovery. Today's presentation is brought to you by FuseHub, one of 11 centers within the New York State Manufacturing Extension Partnership Network, or NYMEP. There are 10 regional centers that are located across New York State. FuseHub is the statewide center and is responsible for marketing and supporting NYMEP, which provides growth and innovation services to small and medium-sized manufacturers. Each year, NYMEP's extensive network of experts helps hundreds of companies create and retain jobs, increase profits, and save time and money. I would now like to introduce the members of our panel. Jim DiAugustino, Director of the Terrain Develop and Optimize in Syracuse. John Flynn, Quality Assurance Manager at MTI Instruments, and Owen Trueblood of 10X Beta. Welcome. Jim, I guess we'll start with you, please.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Steve. And as Steve mentioned, TDO, we are a part of New York MEP, and FuseHub is our sister. So we're happy to be here alongside them presenting this material today. And we really feel this is a really important, critical topic given the current pandemic. And I'm hopeful that you pick up some new things today, maybe some topics and ideas that you hadn't really considered yet. And we're certainly here to help. So TDO, as Steve mentioned, TDO is a part of New York Manufacturing Extension Partnership, or New York MEP as we call it. We're right alongside FuseHub there. We at TDO, we're a not-for-profit consulting or advising organization. We were founded in 1988. And as Steve pointed out, there are actually 11 MEPs located all throughout New York State, 10 regional centers, plus FuseHub, which has statewide reach there. And overall, TDO is one of 400 national service locations. So the MEP system that FuseHub and TDO are a part of is actually much bigger than just New York State. It's a national network that also includes Puerto Rico as well. At TDO here, we've got the Central New York region, which includes Cayuga, Cortland, Madison, Onondaga, and Oswego counties. But there is a New York MEP center, a regional New York MEP center for every single part of New York State. So if you're not sure who your local MEP is, FuseHub can certainly help connect you there to your local MEP. And Steve also alluded to this, but all the MEP centers were measured on the impacts that we're able to generate and deliver for our clients, which are done via surveys after projects are completed. Those impacts include new sales, retained sales, new jobs, retained jobs, cost savings, and new investments there. So, it's really part of the MEP mission, and we all, it's all in our DNA. But we're very much active participants and fully engaged when we work with clients. It's a shared partnership there. If the work we deliver doesn't result in any impacts, well, we're going to see those results or lack thereof on the surveys. So it's very much a mutual relationship there. At TDO, we've developed a very strong engineering bench strength here. We have electrical, mechanical, industrial, and computer engineers on staff. And as far as our services and core offerings go, we're going to talk about the quality management piece today, but that's one of our lead offerings. We also get into some food safety. We have ISO 9001, AS 9100, and ISO 14001 lead auditors on staff, so we can help with a full range of projects on those, as we will talk about. We also do a lot of Lean Six Sigma training and certifications as well. We have Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt on staff, and we also do, the Black Belt and Green Belt offerings there for trainees. We do a lot of lean manufacturing work, tech support, engineering support, automation, design controls. We do a lot of training within industry, or TWI trainings, job relations, job instruction, job method, job safety, and our new favorite, Toyota Kata. We also do a lot of maintenance, TPM, and supply chain management work as well. But we're here today to talk about the quality side of things. And you might be wondering, why are we talking about quality management system certifications during a pandemic? Don't you have a whole lot of other pressing things going on? Well, yes, but it's also, as we'll talk about, a great opportunity, a great time to be thinking about these quality management system certifications. So there are a lot of certifications out there. I'm sure you're aware of many of them. They include ISO 9001, AS 9100, if you're in the aerospace world. There's ISO 14001 in the environmental side. And then there's IATF 16949, which you'll find on the automotive side of things. And there are others as well. These are some of the more popular ones. And again, you may be asking yourself, could this actually be the right time to upgrade your quality management system and achieve a formal certification in one of those areas during the pandemic? Well, if you're thinking about it, you're not alone. TDO, as well as many of the other New York MEP centers around the state, are currently engaged in assisting multiple clients who've decided to pursue formal quality certifications like ISO or AS 9100 as a direct result of COVID. Now, these clients, they're seeking to use those certifications to break into new markets or other markets that aren't currently available to them without the formal certifications. And one of the benefits, one of the great benefits or side effects, if you will, of these quality systems are the operational efficiencies that they can help deliver there. And so, it may be an awkward time with so much going on around us and so much going on, not just statewide, but nationally. But in terms of your business, you should really be thinking about, if you're not already, what could these formal certifications offer to your business that you don't currently have today? Again, there's the operational efficiency side, but there also may be some new markets that these formal certifications will allow you to get into and maybe start quoting work. And again, that's a big reason why a lot of our clients right now that we're currently engaged with for these QMS certifications, that's what they're looking to do. And then, this is the nice little added bonus or benefit, but there's funding in most geographic areas of New York that can help offset those implementation and certification costs. Now, here in central New York, and some of these funding partners are elsewhere in the state as well, But some of those funding partners here locally in Central New York are National Grid, we have NYSEG or RG&E, there's the WDI group, there's TAC, TAAC, and then also, again, here in Central New York, we have CNY Works. So I encourage you, as I mentioned earlier, if you're not sure who your local MEP is, step one is connect with them. But step two, if this is something that's of interest to you, at least exploring, those local MEP centers can help connect you with those potential funding partners as well. So along with the formal quality management system certifications, there's also the quality and productivity improvement side. Again, lots of stuff going on around us right now that may be clouding your vision. But one of the things that we know we can always do is take care of our house, our business here. And how can we do that? Well, there's a lot of stuff on the quality and productivity side that you could be doing either by yourself or in coordination with your local MEP. It's a great time to look at those projects that can help improve external and internal quality levels, reduce scrap and defects, and improve your overall productivity. Here at TDO, we lean on, your core foundational lean tools, Lean Six Sigma, and again, I mentioned Toyota Kata was one of our favorites. We've been utilizing Toyota Kata and that methodology to really help drive a lot of operational improvements and quality improvements for our clients there through the improvement Kata approach there. And like I said, TDO is one of many New York MEP centers that's currently doing this type of work and engaged with clients offering these types of projects and services there. And we're doing a lot of it, as a direct result of COVID. Folks are trying to get more efficient. People are trying to save money, trying to reduce costs, in the face of all these other elements that we're having to deal with now. And again, much as was the case with the formal certifications, there's also funding in most areas of New York that can help offset the costs of these types of quality and productivity projects as well. Same funding partners, National Grid, NYSEG, RG&E, Workforce Development Institute, TAC, and CNY Works. Again, I encourage you to, really figure out who your local MEP is and talk with them, engage with them, and figure out, what types of projects you might be able to undertake, what kind of funding's out there. Your local MEP is a great resource to help you out. And again, if you're located here in Central New York in our 5-county region and you haven't connected with us at TDO, please do so. But, again, overall, it's a great time to be thinking about those new markets that a formal quality certification might help you get into, or also those quality and productivity projects that you could do at your business to help reduce costs and make you a little more competitive for the long run there. So again, if you want more information, Fuse Hub, you can always turn to Fuse Hub for help connecting with your local MEP. And thank you. That's all I've got. Steve?
All right, Jim, many thanks. Now we'll hear from John Flynn of MTI Instruments. John?
Okay. First off, my apologies for not being able to see me. My webcam decided it didn't want to work today during the testing, so my apologies for that. I am John Flynn. I'm the Quality Assurance Manager of MTI Instruments, and I worked in the quality field and the nuclear industry for the past 30 years. I've been at MTI for just about 6 months, and in the past 6 months, it was not out of the frying pan into the fire. I jumped over the frying pan right away. Within the first 2 months of me being on board, I had to pass the ISO 9000 2015 recertification audit, and then had the pandemic and a major calibration cycle on all our equipment. So it's been quite the ride being here. And I knew about the ISO audit when I came on board, so that wasn't a big surprise. But as you go through, ISO and your quality documents, and you're thinking about, strategic planning, did your strategic planning cover a section on pandemics? Ours did not. We did have an outline for disaster recovery, but it dealt mainly with IT and preservation of IT information, nothing else. So that's a big area for us to continuing improvement is, well, what do we do when this happens again? Not if, but when, because it's happened once, and there's lots of lessons learned that we can move on from. But there were a lot of issues that we had to work through, and most, everyone in manufacturing had to deal with the same type of issues that we did. We were forced to be shut down initially. MTI, because we supply instruments to the military and semiconductor industry, we were considered an essential business. But then that was good, we were able to stay open, but we also had at that point to figure out how to work remotely in a manufacturing company. What does that mean? How do we do that? And in a very short period of time, we had to figure out the IT infrastructure for remote workers, laptops, desktops, and all those peripherals, and how do you get people working from home. The VPN bandwidth, that was a nightmare in the beginning. And we had the entire, basically, if they were working in an office, they were working from home. And it was just the manufacturing crew that was left on site, working in on and off, and reduced working hours towards the beginning, the early stages of the pandemic. And that was lots of growing pains. We're an ISO company, document control, all those things. All of a sudden, we didn't have people to sign documents. And so we had to very quickly figure out, how do we do things in a virtual environment where people aren't, you can't walk a piece of paper around to get it signed. And then we had to figure out, okay, we do email approvals and PDF signatures, keeping records of all the approvals. And then we have to change our document control procedures to account for the changes that we were making on the fly, making the paperwork match the crime, so to speak. So it's still a work in progress. We still have to dot all the I's, cross all the T's, but we're able to, our decision right away is we have to be flexible. We have to make sure that we can continue to make products and meet our commitments as much as we can, and not let the quality program strangle us, but still meet the intent and of the ISO quality process. Some other things that we had to work through was just workflow issues. Since everyone was not on site, you couldn't have a quick discussion to solve a problem or an issue. We found out real quick, and which is a no-brainer, is email's a poor substitute for face-to-face communication. Sometimes things get lost in email, lost in translation. We've used Microsoft Teams extensively for meetings so that we could have that face-to-face communication. And then also just the communication between workers and supervisors, just making sure that we could have those lines of communication open in the workforce on the production floor. Growing pains, but we're able to think outside the box and try to make the stuff, work through these issues. Other quality issues that we had to deal with was the supply chain. And communication is absolute key with our suppliers. We had to find out what issues they had to deal with. Where were they? Were we going to be in trouble with the inbound supplies that we had? At the same time, we looked at our approved vendor list, and what are our alternative suppliers? Are they in the same boat? Would it even make a difference if we jumped to an alternative supplier, because we were all pretty much in the same boat? So it opened our eyes to find out where our weak spots were and are in our supply chain. The other side of the supply chain is communicating with our customers about meeting commitments and realistic shipping dates. We had some conversations both to and from. They were asking us and we were asking them about delivery dates. How is COVID affecting your ability to meet the commitments that you've made? We had to change some commitments, and as long as communication lines were open, that was okay. Another issue we found out was our normal shipping times and lines were all messed up, and they're still not at the way they were pre-pandemic. especially when you're going overseas, between the air freight and the shipping and just going overseas. The shipping times we used to be able to depend on aren't there. So again, that goes back to communications with our customers. If we always assumed it would take 5 days to get from here into Asia, we tell them no, it may take 10 days just because of the slowdown in customs and air traffic. Just learning the new normal, so to speak. The other issue that we ran into in the middle of this pandemic was our company had a major calibration cycle. We have about 100 pieces of test equipment that we routinely use, and in previous years we schedule a on-site visit from a cal house. They come and they calibrate all the equipment on site because it's easier that way, and then everything's calibrated in 1 or 2 days and it's all good. Well, it was scheduled for the first week of April. That was right when everything was being shut down. So both by us and the cal house decided, no, we'll wait. But that creates a big issue of, I have calibrated equipment that's now going out of calibration. What do we do? How do you handle that big issue? Because you can't use non-calibrated equipment to produce calibrated equipment for customers. And I was looking through our calibration procedure at that time, and we had a little caveat in there that I had inherited, and it had never been used in our company, but I used it. And the caveat was that we can extend the calibration on an item for 2 months in special circumstances with the QA manager approval. So that gave me a 2-month reprieve to be able to figure out how am I going to get all this equipment calibrated. And so what we did was, during that 2 months, we were able to ship the pieces of equipment to the cal house. They'd come pick some up, we'd ship some to them back and forth until we got to the point where the stuff that I had on site had to stay on site to continue to be used, and they came out for 1 day to finish the calibration on those items. But it was it just happened, so that's keep that in the back of your brain bucket idea of, make sure you give yourself an out so that if you run into a similar situation, that you don't end up shutting down your whole production because you don't have calibrated equipment. Taking a step back and looking at everything that's happened, at a 10,000-foot view, write down all the lessons learned from the pandemic and incorporate them into your continuous improvements, next management review. And think about, what are you going to do the next time we're forced into a shutdown or limited work capacity, or key people are out on quarantine, or how do you manage those issues? It's all very fresh in our minds, so we can write those down and include them into continuing improvements. What did we do good? What did we do bad? How can we improve the next time? We can use this as an opportunity. It was painful, but an opportunity to make ourselves better as we go forward. So that's all I have. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact the team there and we can answer them. And Steve, back to you. Thanks.
All right, John, that was great. Many thanks. And we'll now hear from Owen Trueblood of 10X Beta. Owen?
Hi. So I'd like to talk about how the company that I work for, 10X Beta, sorry, are you able to see my screen now? So the company that I work for, 10X Beta, is a product development firm that builds teams to build products and takes projects from the early stage of concept development through to prototyping and onto mass manufacture. So very quickly, there are 3 examples here of products that we've worked on in the past. The one on the left is a company called StrongArm, which produces sensors that are worn by workers to help reduce injury rates in the warehouse environments where they work, by collecting many different forms of data from onboard sensors and then doing various analyses to determine when there are unsafe conditions so they can be improved. 10x Beta did the early product development work for that. The center is MyoView, which is a specialized medical device that's used for determining intramuscular pressure to diagnose and analyze something called compartment syndrome. So again, the design and prototyping for that device was done by 10x Beta. On the right, there's a medical device sold by a company called Spirowave, which is an AI health monitor that uses many different forms of sensors to watch patients from a bedside and determine when they're going through some event that a nurse might want to know about to assist with care. For example, getting out of bed when they shouldn't be, or if they've fallen, for example. So 10x Beta has worked on a lot of different products, not all of them health or safety related like these are. And usually the work has been prototyping oriented and not touching necessarily all the other aspects of product development, including quality in manufacturing, specifically for medical devices. Spirowave was different. So for this project, what happened was very quickly after the pandemic really got going and New York City started to shut down, Marcel, who runs 10x Beta, and Scott Cohen, who is one of the founders of New Lab, the space that 10x Beta is located in, decided to try to do something and looked for a lot of different potential projects and ended up on ventilators. Because at the moment when this was happening in the early days of March, it was becoming very clear that there was a critical shortage of ventilators in New York City, and anything that might assist with the supply would greatly reduce the upper ceiling of death for the city. So a lot of different people got contacted and kind of assembled this group very rapidly that decided they were going to make a ventilator as quickly as possible. So Spirowave is the result. It's a low-cost automatic resuscitator that helps hospitals expand their capacity for care for patients with critical ventilation needs. It's not a direct replacement for a ventilator, but it's sort of a bridge device that allows somebody who is destined for a ventilator to be put on an alternative device to help reduce the strain on the critical supply of the full-fledged ventilators. And it went from early stage development with just parts on a desk in mid-March to EUA approval from the FDA mid-April. And we've shipped now 3,000 units to New York City through the EDC. So we're now looking out at the next phases of the project. This is what the device looks like up close. There's a control panel on the left with custom digital controls, and the rest of the device is mostly the mechanical shell, electrical systems, and the actuator that squeezes the bags, which are used to do the actual ventilation. These bags are normally used manually by doctors or medics that are in an ambulance to do short-term ventilation when someone's on a gurney or in transit. And normally they're not used for extended periods, but when we were looking at what it would take to create a ventilator, they were quickly settled on as the most rapid way to get equivalent ventilator functionality without concerning ourselves with a lot of the difficulty and engineering work that's required for a full-fledged ventilator, which has many other features that these bags cannot support. So from the beginning, we kind of constrained our problem by focusing on a more limited set of features. My role in all this was to lead the development of the control system and implement the quality assurance testing at the end with the assistance of our manufacturing partner, Voice Technologies. So for us, the question, like, and one of the many questions that came up really early on was, how do you build and scale very, very quickly without sacrificing quality? Because even though we were experienced in prototyping things very, very quickly, that's pretty much the default for any project that we take on at 10x Beta. We don't have a lot of experience going from very early stage prototyping to mass manufacturing for something as critical as a medical device so rapidly. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to scale up and meet the deadlines and make an impact without compromising. So one of the things that became very, very obvious early was the need to have expert feedback as often as possible, as early as possible. And the way that we were able to get that was to bring experts into the team, so and have them in place with where we were working. Albert Kwan, who's on the left, is a doctor who graciously donated an enormous amount of his time and assistance to helping us figure out the medical side of the device. He pulled extremely long hours with all of us, which was pretty incredible because he had his own practice to worry about as well. On the right is Sabrina from Nemedio, which is the partner who helped us with medical device certification. And for that, we were able to leverage all of the experience that they have and a lot of digital tooling and software tools that they have developed to do a lot of the work for certification remotely. But it was extremely critical to have these experts and others in location with us so that we could get feedback kind of on the fly. Like as soon as we had a question, all we had to do was go down the hall or they were right next to us and we could ask the question, get an answer immediately. Another critical lesson that we learned was, and something that was also a hunch that we went into the process with, was this need to co-locate R&D and production. So normally when we do a project, we are doing prototyping in our shop where I am speaking from and our office, and then we will go to third parties for the actual production. And usually those third parties are on the other side of the world in China. In this case, we didn't have the time to wait for parts and the logistic networks were failing around us. So really the only way to get things done quickly was to have the entire stack from the early stage prototyping and the engineering decisions to the final stage production decisions and implementation in the same place. And that was accomplished through where we were located in Voice Technologies, which is in Long Island City. Voice is unique because they have everything needed for prototyping and production in the same place. They can do small scale production all the way back to early stage prototyping. So it was enormously beneficial that they allowed us to use their space and really make a mess of it while we were developing this product. While we were doing the prototyping, we were using their production tools, and that meant that when we finished, the design was very, very close to being ready to go for a production run on their machines. We didn't have to change many machine file outputs or any of the details. We really just needed to kind of flesh out the requirements and solve a lot of problems, but we didn't need to start fresh for the production files once we were done prototyping. And it also meant that along the way, we produced maybe a few dozen finished looking versions of the machine, because anytime we had enough critical mass that a prototype made sense to test some idea that we had, or something that needed to be proven out, we had the opportunity to just make it. So the lessons that we learned in the way very, very, very quickly through this process were absolutely essential. And it probably wouldn't have been possible to move from prototyping to production so quickly without this kind of co-location of resources. So the last thing is another critical piece was leveraging collaborative software tools for the development. So I'm an engineer, and as an engineer, or really I should say as a software engineer, I'm very used to using version control for everything. So tracking everything we're doing in an engineering process, not just through documentation, but through automated records, and also having tools to let us take that data and make use of it, to understand the history, decision making, and to go back and find mistakes or to resolve critical issues in the history of the project. So I wanted that same sort of tool set for everything, and Numedio let us have something like that for the regulation related elements of the project. But for quality control, I wanted to use a tool like this. And so the tool I chose was Tulip, which is a manufacturing execution system that runs very much like Google Sheets or like Google Docs. Everything is automatically collaborative by default, but it's also saving every action that's taken in the background and creating a history of versions automatically. So we were able to jump in and hash out the quality control process very, very quickly, as if we were making a Google spreadsheet or a Google presentation or a PowerPoint. But we were able to also communicate with the quality control team at Boyce, which was actually the team that would execute, and also we needed to integrate their feedback on what was proper in their context of their processes. And at the same time, we wanted to have all the record keeping so that we would have information for auditing, and we wanted to have information to solve problems that we would encounter on the fly. So some of that was manual. Many of these, any manufacturing process is going to have many, many manual steps, but there was also a lot of automation that was incorporated. So for the project, I developed this automation system that plugged into Tulip and allowed us to mix automated and manual steps to execute the quality control process. So most of the critical quality control processes were executed manually, but then there were secondary checks and a critical section of automated testing that was implemented within Tulip and triggered by the quality control operators, but all of the data was saved alongside the data about their manual quality control operations. And so having that extra information, it was absolutely essential, because while quality control was going on, we were still doing engineering. We actually started production while the design was not finalized. And so the only way that that was possible was through information being collected in excess and then filtered through as needed after the fact, because we were building the machines and then solving problems and then running secondary production processes on some subsets of the machines that needed those changes. And it was absolutely critical that we were able to track exactly which machines had which changes, track which machines had problems related to an engineering problem that was being solved, etc. So all of this automation and excess data collection was really important. And actually, during the process of doing this project, towards the end, I got sick and had to leave and work remotely. And for that roughly 2-week period, I was able to still solve problems almost the moment that they were happening, because through this automation system, I had live access to the production floor, and I would get texts or calls from quality control operators about some problem they're encountering, and within seconds I could be connected to the machine that they were working on, see what the problem was, and often solve it remotely. So without that, we would have at many stages gotten bogged down and stopped. Not to say there were no problems with this process, there were enormous issues that we encountered, many of them paralyzing, but for the most part, we were able to execute on schedule. In the end, we were able to finish the job on schedule using all of this tooling. So the key takeaways are these 3 things. What we found was that we needed to have experts in place to incorporate their feedback early and often. It was critical to co-locate R&D and production, and leveraging automation and software tools allowed us to move really, really quickly without worrying about losing information that we would need to solve problems later, and also feel confident that the quality of the product was sufficient and matched what we were promising. So thank you.
So Owen, that was great. Many thanks.
My pleasure.
All right, so listen, that concludes the presentation part of today's webinar. What I would like to talk to you about now is an opportunity to do more than just listen to things you can do to improve. All that you need to do is request a custom recommendation report from New York MEP. And the way this works is that you reach out to FuseHub's Eric at fusehub.com, and FuseHub will perform an initial assessment by phone. We will look at your company, we'll go ahead and determine what you need, and then we will make some recommendations, and you'll receive them in the form of a custom recommendation report. So this is a unique opportunity today because you're part of this webinar. So again, to get started on this journey, simply email Eric at fusehub.com. And so now we're going to move into the Q&A part of our event, and we'll have a chance for the audience to ask some questions of our speakers, and there are some that have come in already. And Jim at TDO, I'm going to start with you. This question reads as follows: our company doesn't currently have ISO or any real quality system, and we aren't sure if we need it. What would you recommend we do as a first step?
Yeah, so I think, when we would advise any customer of this, you want to understand your customer side and the business case as well. We would not recommend going through a formal ISO or AS9100 certification if there wasn't some type of business need for it, in terms of like your top line. So I would think about it from that perspective first. And there are some, market studies and things that you can look into to understand, your clients. MEP could actually, help if you wanted to engage with them as well. Your local center could help you understand a little bit more about potential markets that maybe a formal quality certification could get you into. So I guess I would start with that. If you're not sure, dig a little deeper on the customer side to understand what potential business, top line growth or other benefits would there be. The implementation itself doesn't have to be that financially intensive, I guess I'll say. A lot of the projects that we're engaged with with these quality systems projects, you know, some of the clients we're working with are, you know, they have virtually no documentation at all. And in which case, you know, we'll step in. We have a lot of templates and things that, you know, we'll bring to the table to customize for that client. But then we work with other clients that have a ton of documentation already. And so it's just a matter of assembling and pulling it all together. So, you know, I would say, you know, if you think there is a business need, connect with your MEP and they'll help you sort it out and really understand what kind of costs you're looking at. And, you know, ultimately though, like I said, you want to make sure you can make a good, strong business case for it.
All right, sounds good. If I can just do a little pitch here real quick. If you don't know who your MEP center is and you're in New York State, you're not sure, well, I'm in this county, who should I call? Just reach out to FuseHub and we'll get you to the right place. So there's another question that's come in. This one is for John at MTI. John, we can't see you, but we can certainly hear you. And the question is this: can you talk a little more about some of the things you did to ensure you maintained quality with specific companies in your supply chain?
Okay, that's a great question on maintaining quality with specific companies. We have a very, you know, at MTI, we have a very short list of suppliers to begin with, because of just the nature of the instruments that we make. We just have a very small approved vendor list, and because of that, we had some delays in inbound shipping. But since I was a quality manager, even though we were shut down and on reduced manning, I pretty much worked almost every day of the outage or the whole shutdown. And it was more paying attention to just extra quality checks on material coming in and paying far more attention to details that might not have paid attention to in the first, you know, on normal receipt inspections. But it's like, okay, everyone's working half manning, and, you know, it's like just paying a lot more attention to the little details so that those, if something came in wrong, it didn't bite us as when it got put into the final assembly and, hey, it doesn't work right. Well, it all starts with the very, you know, with the purchase order and initial documents to the receipt inspection, making sure that your vendor supplied you with the correct stuff. And we had to send some stuff back, you know, not a whole lot, but, you know, they know what our quality standards are. And, you know, everyone's still trying to make a dollar during the whole, you know, pandemic. And so we had fairly good luck, but it all ties to that receipt inspection on inbound materials.
Excellent. And Owen, here's a question that came in for you. Because your product was a medical device, were there extra quality requirements that you needed to consider, like from the FDA?
Yeah, for sure. I'll say we were operating in a context of the general emergency, and the approval that we ended up getting was explicitly the emergency use authorization. So we didn't have to go through full FDA certification for the device. We're thinking about that now, or a version of the device with some changes. That process will take anywhere from 6 months to a few years. But while we were working on Spirowave, we were in close contact with the FDA. And it was very interesting to have that experience. It's not one that I was familiar with before the project. We were able to actually get a lot of really good, quick feedback from the FDA. We also had a team of consultants who were helping us understand the regulations, because as you all know, there's a lot of reading to do when it comes to quality, but also just generally the medical device regulations. They're very complicated. And so understanding the practical implications in the engineering decisions we were making of those regulations, it was only possible through the consultants that we had. But the critical regulations that we were referring to, those standards were like mainly 61-2, which the FDA put out to cover emergency ventilators. So that was our primary reference.
All right, great. So listen, I would like to thank Jim DiAugustino from TDO, John Flynn, MTI Instruments, and Owen Trueblood from 10X Beta for being with us today on the panel. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the insights that you've shared, and would also like to thank everyone that took some time to tune in today and listen. So as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and all attendees will receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to the recording. It will also be available on the FuseHub website. Important again to emphasize that if you are out there listening, you can do more than just listen. You can get the help that you need in terms of quality, both during COVID-19 and hopefully afterwards as well. And all that you really need to do is reach out to Eric at fusehub.com, send Eric an email, request a custom recommendation report. And what'll happen is Eric will give you a call on the phone. You'll talk about what's going on at your company, and then FuseHub, which is the statewide MEP Center for New York State, will make some recommendations about how you can get the help that you need. You'll get a very attractive and informative written report like this as well that you can refer to and that you can also share with other people within your company so that you can get the buy-in, frankly, that you need some time to go ahead and get help. So again, on behalf of the webinar, Maintaining Quality Amidst COVID-Related Disruptions, which is part of our Manufacturing Reimagined series, I'm your moderator, Steve Melito, and we are signing off.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.